Councilwoman, who's your next witness?
State calls James Marano.
Good afternoon. You are James Marano.
Yes, sir.
Welcome. This is our witness stand over here. When you get there, you just remain standing for a bit and you put the things down. Remain standing. Raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please state your full legal name for the record.
James Marano,
Please spell the first and last name for the court report.
Jambes Marano.
Thank you, sir.
Please have a seat. Mr. Marano, that microphone in front of you adjusts up or down, but does not move back and forth.
Thank you.
Are you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Counsel, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the members of the jury and tell them where you're employed?
My name is James Marano. I'm a senior crime laboratory analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in Orlando, Florida.
And how long have you been employed by the, we'll call it FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
20 years.
Okay. And in what capacities during those 20 years?
I've been a crime laboratory analyst in the trace material section in the Orlando laboratory.
And can you tell us your official title?
Senior crime laboratory analyst.
And can you briefly describe the nature of your work?
In the trace material section, we're tasked with recovering, recognizing, examining, and comparing items of trace materials or trace evidence. These are typically things like glass and paint, things that are broken during the commission of a crime or some incident, and they're submitted to our laboratory from police departments and sheriff's offices, and we're asked to compare them and to write a report about our findings.
So law enforcement agencies within the state of Florida can make submissions to the FDLE.
Yes.
Specifically, can you tell us about your specialization in glass? How long have you done that?
I completed the glass training program within FDLE in 2008, and I've been working in cases in both paint and glass for about 14, almost 15 years.
And can you tell us about your formal education?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut. I was able to double major during that time, so I also have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and I graduated in 2002.
And as part of your training and certification that's required by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, can you tell us about some of those trainings?
Yes, so when I moved to Florida in 2003 and I entered the paint training program within FDLE, that's a 2-year training program. It's very comprehensive. It's broken up into 2 phases. There's an academic phase that includes lectures and practical exercises as well as tests, oral, written, and practical tests. After completing that, I did some casework in paint, and then I entered the glass training program, and I did a similar training program within glass. It's about a 1.5-year long training program. After I completed that, I was able to do independent casework in both of those material types.
And are there any continuing requirements that you currently hold or that you do throughout the time you've been employed by FDLE to keep up to date in your field?
Yeah, we try to do continuing education as frequently as possible. I've attended many seminars, workshops, virtual workshops the last several years. But I've taken some week-long training courses, either in trace evidence generally, in forensic science, or specifically with regard to paint, glass, testifying in court, statistics, things like that, anything related to trace evidence.
And are you a member of any professional organizations or any associations within your field?
Yes, I'm a member of the American Society of Trace Evidence Examiners, known as ASTE.
And how about your certification within FDLE? What are you certified as?
So FDLE certifies me to work independent casework in both paint, it includes polymers, so it's paint polymers as well as glass.
How much of your time would you say is devoted to glass analysis?
Typically it would be 50% of my time, but the last few years it's been more. I've been involved in almost exclusively anything having to do with glass in the laboratory. We have a trainee that I just got out of training, so I trained him the last several years. I am responsible for the instrumentation that is used to analyze glass, so I have to maintain it, I have to validate it if we get a new instrument, to make sure that it's working properly. I write the standard operating procedures and the work instructions for those instruments, as well as anything else related to glass. And I've been working all the glass work for FDLE for several years.
So you're doing both an administrative role as well as a forensic role?
Yeah, I would say that, sure.
Approximately how many samples of glass evidence have you examined during your career?
Hundreds, several hundreds, I would say.
Okay. And does that include casework?
Yeah, I would say training and casework. I've looked at several hundreds of glass samples in the last 14 years.
How about your prior testimony in court? Have you previously testified as an expert in the area of trace evidence or trace materials?
Yes, I've testified 14 times in 9 different counties in the state of Florida.
And 14 times since what year?
I didn't have the opportunity to testify until 2012, so in the last 11 years I've testified about 14 times.
And as far as proficiency training, is that continuing and ongoing during your time?
You're referring to proficiency testing?
Proficiency testing.
Yes. Every year we do have to take a proficiency test in the subdisciplines that you work. So I have to take a test in paint and a test in glass every year. And I have to get the right answer to continue doing that work.
And are you currently up to date?
Yes.
And in this specific case, were you asked to examine items of glass evidence?
Yes, I was.
And I'm going to refer you to FDLE number 2019-05-02577. Is that a unique number that is assigned by FDLE?
Yes, that's the unique case number.
And when cases come in, they're assigned a FDLE unique number, correct?
Yes.
Is that how you track the evidence in the case?
Yes.
And where's the evidence is coming from other departments, correct?
Yes.
And what did you receive for examination in this particular case?
In this case, I received 8 items of evidence. They were numbered by FDLE, items 1 through 8.
And were they previously numbered by the department that sent them to you?
Yes.
Do you recall the department?
It was the Miramar Police Department.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to approach this exhibit. What's already in evidence is states 42. Can you take a look at that? And do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how is it that you recognize it?
I see the FDLE case number, the item numbers, and my initials in my handwriting.
So you're able to identify it based on the packaging as well.
Yes, the packaging and my initials are on the seal that I resealed.
Okay, and I'm going to show you states what's already in evidence is states 22. Do you also recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
And how is it that you recognize it?
In the same way, the FDLE case number, item numbers, and my initials are on the packaging as well as on the seals.
And are those, what item numbers, would those equate to your FDLE item numbers?
These are item numbers 1 through 5.
Okay, and in states 42, those are item numbers.
These are item numbers 6, 7, and 8.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been pre-marked for identification purposes only as states ZZ. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how is it that you recognize it?
Also by my initials, the case number, the item number in my handwriting, and my initials on the seals.
And do these exhibits collectively represent what you were provided with for the analysis in this case?
Yes, it does.
Any changes, or is it in the same, substantially same condition as you last saw it?
These are in the same condition as I last saw it, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move into evidence what was pre-marked to say ZZ as the next numbered exhibit.
Is there any objection?
No.
It'll be admitted.
States ZZ will be marked states 50.
Marano, I'm going to leave things with you. There's some gloves there, a pair of scissors.
All right, so let's go through the 5 question items labeled under FDLE as 1 through 5. What do you reference those samples as?
So these are represented as being found at the scene. The scene was described as US 27. So all 5 items were found in one scene.
Okay, and states number, I believe 20, is that states number 22 or 42? If I may, sure, John?
Yes, ma'am.
What's this?
Yes.
22?
22. So let's refer to states 42. What are those samples from?
These are represented as being glass standards from a vehicle, from a Jeep Compass. It was described as being a standard from the front passenger window, the rear passenger window, and then a sample from the rear window.
And what are you tasked with when you're provided with these items?
My job is to open up the evidence, inventory what's there, describe what's there, and then compare the 2 samples. But typically the question is, there's question samples found someplace, and the agency wants to know, is it like another sample? Is it like a sample from the window, a broken window? Basically asking, could it have come from that window?
So it's essentially a hypothesis, right? Are items 1 through 5 compared or of the same nature as items 6 through 8?
Yes, I'm looking to see if they're like one another.
Okay. So when you get those items, what is it that after you've documented the items and everything like that, what are you doing next?
After I document them and take inventory by taking notes and pictures, then I actually start the comparison part. And I'm doing a side-by-side comparison. So I'm looking to see, I'm actually looking for differences. Can I see any differences between these 2 samples? So I'm looking at the color, the thickness of the samples. Can I see what type of glass it is? Is it window glass or is it container glass, like glass from a bottle? Generally speaking, that's what I'm doing first. And if I don't find any differences, then as I progress through the examination, I'm doing more detailed comparisons using microscopes and instrumentation.
All right, I'm going to stop you there. So that analysis that you just discussed, is that your macro analysis?
Yeah, macroscopic is a fancy way of saying with the naked eye. Yeah.
So essentially you're doing an overview.
Yes.
And what is your next method or your next step?
The next step would be a microscopic examination. I use a low-powered microscope at my workstation, and I'd be comparing the samples side by side, looking for microscopic features that would tell me what kind of glass it is, or if there's any differences between them.
And can you describe in detail what you're doing as far as the microscopic approach? Like, how are you looking at each glass and which samples?
In this case, these fragments were rather large, so I didn't really need to use a microscope as much as I do in other types of cases. But for instance, I'm looking at the fractured characteristics. So I'll take the fragments and look at the side of it, and that would instruct me what kind of glass it is, as opposed to is it tempered or non-tempered glass, things like that. Kind of generally, what type of glass is it?
And is there further analysis as you go through? That would be your microscopic stage. Is there further analysis?
The next, after the microscopic, yes, there would be instrumental examinations where I'm using an instrument or a machine to provide data about the sample. So one of those tells me chemical information about the glass, so I can see what the chemical composition of the glasses are. And another one is called the refractive index. And I can measure the refractive index of both samples and compare those values that I get.
Outside of the microscopic analysis stage, are you using any other equipment during the, for instance, chemical composition review stage or the refractive index stage?
I use a micrometer to measure the thickness of the fragments to see if they're the same thickness. And I also use an ultraviolet lamp looking at the surface of the glass. If one surface fluoresces or glows brightly, then that tells me how that glass was manufactured. If it does do that, then I can say that it's consistent with float glass, meaning it was made using the float glass process. And that's just to kind of tell me what kind of glass it is again.
Okay, so you kind of explained the general broad overview. Can you give us a little background into what makes glass even unique and how does it apply to your discipline, right?
If I can explain how glass is made, it might assist the jury.
Would that aid in your testimony?
Yes.
Yeah.
So float glass is the most common manufacturing process to make window glass. Essentially, you have raw materials, which are minerals like sand, soda ash, and lime, that are mined from the earth and they're melted down in a furnace. And that molten mixture is poured over a tin bath. So it's molten tin, and the glass floats on top of it. That's why it's called float glass. The difference in density allows that to happen. And what that allows the manufacturer to do is to slowly pull that ribbon of glass over the surface of that tin. They can control the thickness of it, and you also get extremely smooth, flat surfaces. So that's why modern window glass looks flawless. You can see through it. There's no defects in it typically. So that tin actually leaches into the glass, and that's why I can see that tin or float surface when I use the ultraviolet lamp. Thank you, I appreciate that.
You take a minute.
Thank you. Excuse me, thanks.
So is glass unique between manufacturers?
It's hard to say. I like to speak more in terms of plants, right? So glass is made in a big manufacturing plant. There's probably over 200 float glass plants globally. So there's many plants making glass 24/7 all the time. So from plant to plant, there's going to be differences because they get the raw materials from locally sourced areas. The manufacturing process itself will change the composition of the glass. For instance, that furnace that I talked about where they melt everything, it's made of bricks, zirconium bricks. That zirconium can break down over time and get into the glass. So you'll see levels of zirconium increase and decrease over time from one plant. So I can't say that the glass came from a specific plant because that plant's going to change the end product over time. So there's a lot of variation in glass from plant to plant and within one plant over time.
So essentially, for instance, Toyota, they have an assembly line of plant that they're creating or manufacturing glass for their vehicles. Within that manufacturing plant, there's going to be differentiations within the glass that's manufactured in that one plant.
I would agree, except I don't know if Toyota makes their own glass. They would get their glass from a manufacturer
Yes, from
and then put it on their vehicles. And there's no rhyme or reason as to where they're getting their glass from. They can get their glass from one plant 1 year, and then next year they can get their glass from somewhere else. And they can change mid-year if they have to, depending on supply issues.
All right. So let's talk about the evidence that you were provided with. And if you, Your Honor, maybe the witness stepped down to assist in the
Yes,
evidence.
sure.
You can
step
bring the
down, sir.
packaging. We're
Yeah.
able to view it for and the scissors. Yes. And we'll start with the known samples. If you can go ahead and open that.
Where should I do that?
We can do it right here. If you put it under the light. So if you put it under the green light, the jury can see.
So, this is my handwriting, item 6, item 7, and item 8.
And are you able to open the glass, so open the container so we can see the glass particles?
I can.
You need the scissors?
just going to do one at a time so I don't
Yep.
have any incidents. It's confusing them. So this is item 6.
Speak up for the court reporter, please.
Yes, this was item 6 that was just opened.
Okay. And in your macro analysis, can you explain to us what you're looking at?
Yes. So that little plastic dish is what the samples I actually took out of this tin to use in my analysis. I did look at everything, so when I'm taking inventory, I'm in the sense of looking for glass that doesn't belong. I'm looking for different populations of glass, different types of glass. And if they all look the same, then I consider that they're all the same type of glass. So I would do that with the naked eye, and if I have any question, I could use a microscope to look in that pile of glass and see if there's anything that doesn't belong or is not like these other ones. I was just looking at the color, the type of glass that it is, and if I had to, I can look at the thickness of them to measure that.
Okay. And as far as item 5, or 6, 7, and 8, they were very similar in nature? Or from a known,
So,
how would you characterize it?
So item 6 was the one that's represented as being from the front passenger window. That one is light blue-green in color. Once I open up 7 and 8, you'll see that they're actually dark gray in color. So there are 2 types of glass present in these standards.
Okay. I just adjust this for a second for you. Sorry.
This one is item 7, and again, this is the plastic Petri dish that I put in there to separate out glass that I examined in further detail. This was the glass that was submitted to me. As you can see, it's dark gray in color, so it's different from the item 6 glass.
Okay.
And this was represented as being from the rear passenger window.
And when you're ready, we'll look at item number 8.
So again, item 8, this is the plastic Petri dish that I put in here. This was all the glass that was submitted, and this represented the rear window of the vehicle. And again, you can see it's dark gray in color. So it's different from item 6, which was light blue-green in color.
Okay. And you're taking samples you notated in that Petri dish. Why are you taking the samples and not, for instance, utilizing all the glass?
So I would say that my examination does include all of the glass. I'm looking at all of them when I open it up, and I'm taking that inventory, I'm taking pictures and taking notes of what I see, and then I separate out some for further analysis, for detailed analysis. So I don't have to go back into the tin every single time. I can portion out some of this glass, since I'm considering them all to be like one another. Visually, I'll take some out, and that's what I'm using for further examination.
It's like when you did a science test in class, you took the Petri dish and you put a sample of what you were using from, right?
Yes.
I'll give you a chance to put those back in, and then we'll swap out.
Do they need to be resealed?
Not at this time.
Okay. Just put them back inside.
Yep.
And these are items 1 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And with respect to items 1 through 5, are you aware of the origin when you receive these glass samples?
No, I'm only told that they were found at a scene, that they're questioned in nature.
Okay. So for instance, you don't know that it comes from a side window glass, correct?
No.
Okay. And so you can go ahead and open up each sample.
So this is item 1. And like before, there's a petri dish from my analysis where I separated out. These are the samples that were actually analyzed in detail, but I did examine all of the glass in this tin. I looked at it with the naked eye and with a microscope just to take inventory and to describe them.
Okay.
And these are all light blue-green in color. This is item 2. Here's the plastic dish that I put in here. So these are the 5 fragments, 5 or 6 fragments that I separated out and I analyzed in detail. But I did look at everything in this tin, and you can see that these are dark gray in color. They're different from item 1, which was the light blue green in color.
Let me adjust this a little because
So at this time, when I opened up each of these, I made note that there were 2 populations of glass present. There was a light blue-green population and a dark gray population. So I knew that there were 2 types of glass found at the scene, at least 2.
And why is the color significant?
Because it's a discriminating characteristic. It allows me to distinguish different glasses. Item 3. Once again, the plastic dish with the sample of glass that I separated out, and there are numerous light blue-green fragments in this item. This is item 4. Sure. Item 4. Again, the plastic container that I made, and numerous fragments of light blue-green glass. And I will add, in this item, I noted that there was, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a bright green fragment.
If you wait a moment for it to adjust this.
So this fragment right here, that's kind of by itself, that one is actually a different color than the rest. It's bright green. When I analyzed it further, I saw characteristics that were consistent with container glass, so I could tell it did not come from the window. It probably came from a bottle or a container. The last one is item 5. Again, the plastic container. And there's some apparent plant material with glass fragments in this tin. In this one, there was one You can kind of see it stands out, that one bright green fragment right here. It's different from the other one, so it's not like the light blue-green glass. It's bright green in color, and it also had characteristics consistent with container glass. So I can say that that one did not come from a window.
And as far as what's in evidence now, it states 50. Did you originally receive it separately packaged?
No, I made this package.
And why is that?
There were fragments in items 1 and 3, which is glass from the scene, that appeared to have a reddish-brown residue on them. So I thought that might be significant, so I repackaged them separately, and I preserved them so they can go back to the original agency. If they wanted to pursue further examinations, they can. So I did no further examinations with these glass fragments.
So you took a sample from 1 and 3, and you itemized it as 1.1.
Yes.
Okay. That.
I'm going to open it.
All right, you can take your seat. Okay, ultimately, you were able to, after your analysis, go through and make your own opinion as to the origin of this subject glass or the unknown glass. Is that correct?
Yes, I compared, so that, like I said, there were two populations of glass, so I compared the light blue-green glass from the scene to the light blue-green glass standards from the vehicle. Standard, there's one standard. And then I compared the dark green glass from the scene, item 2, to the dark, sorry, I think I misspoke, the dark gray glass in item 2 to the dark gray standards from the vehicle, which were items 7 and 8.
And so what was your ultimate opinion as to the origin of the glass?
So I found no differences between them. So my ultimate conclusion is that the two populations of glass from the scene, the light blue-green glass and the dark gray glass, were like the standards from the Jeep Compass, meaning they either came from that vehicle or they came from another source of glass having the same exact characteristics. That means it would have to have the same color, the same thickness, the same refractive index, as well as the same chemical composition. In my professional opinion, I find that latter possibility of it coming from another source somewhat unlikely.
Okay, and you mentioned the uniqueness of each thing. So for instance, that the glass that's in evidence as states 22 and 42, you said they have the same complete or the same thickness. Why is that significant in your analysis?
Because it can be a discriminating characteristic. If glasses differ by a certain amount, we have a criteria that we follow. If they differ by a certain amount, then I could say that they couldn't have come from the same window if they're different thicknesses.
And what type of glass is in states 22 and 42?
So all the glass that I described is what I call tempered float sheet glass. Tempered means that it's that cubed, diced glass that you see when a side window of a vehicle breaks. It's considered safety glass, so those small pieces won't cut you if the vehicle gets into an accident or if the window is broken. Tempered glass is found in your home too. Maybe your shower door or sliding glass door may have tempered glass, as opposed to non-tempered glass, which is going to break into sharp, pointy shards that could cut you. So I can tell that just by its appearance and some of its microscopic features that's the kind of glass it is. It's tempered glass. By float, I mean it was made using the float process. So when I use that ultraviolet lamp, one surface fluoresced brightly, which is an indication of the surface that was in contact with that tin bath. So some of that tin leached into that surface, it fluoresces, glows brightly under the UV lamp, so I can call it float glass. The last descriptor is that it's sheet glass, which just means that it's window glass. I can tell that the surfaces are flat, they're smooth, those fragments are not from a bottle or a container or tableware, they're from a window or a door or some other type of flat glass.
And the tempered float sheet window glass is consistent with what manufacturers would use to place on vehicles, as opposed, like you said, to glassware that you may have in your house.
Correct. Almost all side windows and rear windows are going to be made out of tempered float sheet glass.
And as specific, you pointed out, I think it was item number 4 and item number 5, that there were some small fragments of bright green glass that you were able to separate as another origin glass.
Yes, there's one fragment in each.
Okay, and you were able to determine and separate those fragments, 1 in each, 4 and 5, from the other sample, correct? Contained within those samples.
Yes, they were different from the glass in those tins. So in item 4 and in item 5, they were different. And they were also different from the glass standards. So they could not have come from the vehicle windows. They're a different color and they're a different type of glass.
And just to clarify, because I'm going to be clear, so for instance, item number 4, you have your own sample that you pulled out. That sample was the tempered float sheet window glass that you're saying is consistent with vehicle glass, correct?
Yes.
However, the small fragment, the bright green glass, was from a different origin, meaning it could have come from a container or another source.
Correct.
And same for item number 5. Your sample was consistent with the tempered float sheet glass that comes from vehicle glass window. But the one small fragment that was the bright green glass was from a different source.
Correct.
And as far as the dark gray glass in item number 7 and 8, what was the, why is that glass dark green, for lack of a better term, versus the other glass, which we see as a light green or bluish characteristic?
Typically, modern vehicle manufacturers make the rear passenger windows and the rear window dark gray, which is a natural tinting so you don't have to put an aftermarket tint on it. It just tints the passenger part of the vehicle.
So you're able to distinguish that dark gray as coming from the rear of the vehicle as opposed to the light, the other colored glass coming from, for instance, a passenger side.
Correct. Usually the front passenger windows are going to be blue-green-ish in color, and then the rear ones will be dark gray, especially in modern vehicles. It's very common now.
And also, as to items number 6, 7, and 8, you indicated, let me ask you about the edges of the glass. Was there anything significant in the edges of those glass?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So, for instance, the rounded finished edges.
Yes. One of the, I'm not sure which exhibit, but one of the exhibits had a rounded finished edge, which is consistent with what you would see in a side window. So if you lower your side window and you feel the top of it, it's smooth, it's rounded. That still doesn't cut you. So we see that in casework. It's an indication of where it came from.
You said you didn't recall. Would your report refresh your recollection as to where that was found?
Yes.
If you have a moment to refresh your recollection and look up when you proceed.
So yes, there was glass in items 6 and 7 that had the rounded finished edges, and those were the 2 samples from the side windows of the vehicle.
And how about you indicate, we haven't defined it yet, but what is frit? Can you explain to the jury what frit is?
Frit is the black, opaque border you'll see in like windshields and also in rear windows. It serves a couple of purposes. The main one on a windshield is it gives the installer a place to apply the adhesive so it sticks to the window stays in place. You'll see it in the rear window as well. It creates just a natural boundary for the glass so it's not so stark visually. You'll also see frit in the side windows. If you ever see the little numbers and codes on side window glass, sometimes it even says who made that glass. That's going to be in frit. Frit is a ceramic coating basically that put on screen printed onto the glass and it's fused to the glass. It's almost impossible to scrape off. So it's part of the glass. If I see frit in casework on 2 different samples, I can compare that frit as well as the glass.
And were you able to identify frit in any of the samples that you were provided with?
Yes, some of the standards had frit, the black frit on it.
Can you identify which item numbers? And if you need to refresh your recollection by reviewing the report, you can do so.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Item 6 had some numbers in frit on one surface, and there was frit on some fragments in item 8 as well.
And that was an indication, was that also an indication to you that this was coming from a vehicle as opposed to another source of glass? The presence of frit?
Yes.
How about specific as to item number 8, defroster? What is the significance of that?
The rear windows on vehicles have that frost capability, and it's basically a metal wire that runs the surface of the glass. Occasionally I see that in casework. So if I do see that, it's an indication that that is a rear window glass source. And item 8 in this case did have a defroster wire or a metal coating that was consistent with defroster wire on one surface. And the item 8 was from a rear window.
Okay, and you mentioned in your opinion regarding the fact that it's your opinion that the latter possibility is considered unlikely. How are you able to narrow down the probability of that second hypothesis?
There's a couple of things that factor into that. One is the fact that I'm using discriminating techniques that distinguish glasses from one another, different sources of glass. Like I said, I'm looking for differences. So if I find a difference, then I could say that these two samples are not like one another and it could not have come from that source. So when I don't find a difference, then I can say that they're like one another. The question is, it either came from this source of the standards, the vehicle, or from another source. That other source would have to have the same exact characteristics. So in this case, you'd have to have a source of two types of glass, light blue, green, and dark gray in color, that were broken. They have to be broken to be deposited at a scene, and it would have to be at that scene. So the pool of potential sources that exist is limited. Not every vehicle is going to have glass like the glass in this case. Not every Jeep may have glass like the glass in this case. Like I said, over time, glass can change from one plant, and glass will vary from plant to plant. While it is possible that another source deposited glass at the scene, and it was exactly like the glass in this case, I find it somewhat unlikely just based on those factors.
Okay. The fact that it would have to be another vehicle with broken glass, so it wouldn't be every Jeep on the road, correct?
Correct, it would have to be broken.
A motion to bring them? Nothing further.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a short recess.
We have no questions.
No questions.
No questions.
All right, so is this witness excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You can step down, sir. You're excused, ladies and gentlemen. Take our recess now. Do not discuss the case. Don't form any opinion about the case. Don't allow anyone to discuss the case further. Research. Keep your head on your chair. Thank you.